Good afternoon. My name is Khalid, and I'm here with Defeats the Purpose. And I'm here solo today. My colleague Isam has gone camping with his family, his words, not mine. And I'm here to bring you a segment about the teachers' protests that have been going on here in New York City. So, if you're not aware of what's been going on with teachers and, of course, students, the city has been planning on putting students back in schools. And so there have been numerous reports about how Mayor Bill de Blasio has keeps talking about how New York isn't like other cities, but by the sound of it, it sounds like he wants New York to be like other cities, but in terms of the coronavirus. So New York has long been on a decline of coronavirus cases for, I would say, actually probably a month at least, maybe a couple of months now. New York has been on a very steady decline of coronavirus cases. I think as of maybe the last couple of weeks, there have only been hundreds, maybe 500 to 700 cases a day in New York, which is a pretty good number, and it's a pretty good indicator that things will soon start to get back to normal or whatever you want to call normal here in New York City. Although it's very tough to say what that means anymore. I really personally, being a progressive, I really hope that things don't get back to a state of normal, at least in a not in a way that would prop up the establishment further, but in a way that would maybe lend some power to progressives within New York. And we are starting to see that here in New York. So with local elections, we're starting to see a lot more progressives, which is something that we've covered here on the show. And also, hopefully those policies start to show themselves here in New York better, just so that, for example, it's not completely unreasonable for a state to want to do something like Medicare for all, right? So it doesn't have to be enacted at the federal level. The state could go ahead and do it. And with more progressives, especially on the down ballot, we could see something like that happen in the future here. But it still is going to be a massive struggle to get something like that implemented, even in a liberal bastion such as New York. So it's just to get right on into it. So when I was down at the protest with my wife, who happens to be a teacher at a charter public school, we noticed. Well, I took some photos and I also did some recordings, and I'm going to show you guys that right now. So here I am at this this protest, and I'm just going to play this sign off or sign on for you, if you will. Hi, this is Khalid with Defeats the Purpose, and we're here at a teachers rally to ensure that no teachers go back to school until it's completely safe. Thank you. So that's basically the purpose of why I was at the protest, and I'm going to jump right into just showing you some pictures. So there were, I would say, hundreds, maybe a couple of hundred people here. It wasn't like the whole country was here or anything like that. I don't think a couple of hundred people at one protest is going to make a big difference. But as you're going to see later on, there is going to be a lot more happening. So this happened on August 3rd, and you can see there's a lot of people here. They have a guillotine with the DOE sign on it, and then they have another person putting defund the NYPD, and so you can see there's a lot of intersectionality, which is a word I'm not crazy about, but I understand and I appreciate what it's about. And so you can see a lot of that is going on here at this protest, and you're seeing a lot of that across the country. I mean, you're seeing it in Portland, Seattle, New York. Now you're seeing it in Kenosha with what happened recently. And so lots of people, I think, are just starting to fight more for civil justice, and you're seeing that bleed into every other sector of our environment. I mean, not just with teachers, but with healthcare and with the police and with our prison reform, and the list goes on and on. I mean, there's just so many things to talk about today about reforms that we could be making in this country. And one of the problems that I personally have with the Democratic and the Republican establishments is that we're just not getting that from them. The Republican establishment has long gone off the deep end. I mean, I don't know for how many years now, but they've just gone completely batshit crazy. And some of the footage from the RNC will actually demonstrate that to you. And how people watch that and still think that it's part of a sane level of reality is totally beyond me. But then people go to the DNC, and it's the same thing. You know, the DNC, they're not really offering people anything. So they speak in the language of progressive. They speak in the language of, you know, forward-looking and good government, good policy, but then they don't actually offer anything. They don't actually put anything in their platform. And so that's one of the problems that I have with the DNC and the RNC, and it's probably why personally I'm not going to be voting for Democrats or Republicans this year. And I wish I didn't vote for Democrats in 2016. You know, even though I did vote for Hillary Clinton, and I thought that was a more rational choice, I just think that it is furthering the demise of the United States. And I think if you're a sensible person, then you will seriously consider not voting for either of these completely corrupted parties. So moving along here, just another image. So you can see we're in front of the New York Supreme Court, by the way. And then I just wanted to highlight this one line on the building of the New York Supreme Court. It says, "The true administration of justice is the firmest pillar of good government." I thought that was just a really funny joke that they decided to put up there because, you know, it's to me, there's a little snark in that. But to me, basically, I don't really think that we live in a just country. I don't really think that justice is served. I think that we have many, many nonviolent offenses, people in prisons over nonviolent offenses, particularly low-level drug offenses, and a lot of those people are black and brown people. And do they deserve to be in prison for abusing substances? I don't really think so. Those people should be out of prison immediately. I think that honestly, we should have recreational drug access in the United States, whatever form that takes. I think that's the most. I think that is probably the best thing that we can do for this country. And to be completely honest with you, until complete and total prison reforms are made possible here in this country, the defund the New York Police Department protests are going to continue, because you're going to continue to see good people robbed of their livelihood by being put in prisons, and you're going to continue to see police patrolling these communities and locking up poor people of color. And, you know, I mean, it's not like they're just locking up poor people of color, but it is a massive proportion of people that they are locking up. And so that's why the focus is on those people today. And so I think that this sentiment right here on this building will hold a lot more weight once we start to get a lot of those prison reforms and are just an overhaul of our legal system, because it's impossible for me to just tackle all of it in one segment. So I'm going to move on here. So you can see this is one of the speakers. I'm going to try and highlight them. Let's put a little laser pointer right above their head. So you can see this is one of the speakers. She was outstanding. I didn't get a chance to chop up her audio. I have chopped up some audio from some other people, but she was really, really good. I wish I had her name as well. Of course, I wasn't able to get all that information at this strike or protest, I should say. And then there was a person who was dressed up like Miss Frizzle from Magic School Bus, and so I have a picture of Miss Frizzle right here from the Magic School Bus, just as a comparison. So I just thought that was an outstanding costume. I think it's just great when people bring a little bit of their sense of humor to these things. And then you have the librarians who stand with Teachers for Public Safety. So this is another organization that standing with teachers right now. And then on top of that, you also, now this isn't in this image, I just wanted to highlight the guillotine again, but we also had doctors standing with Teachers for Public Safety, which I think is a massive, just absolutely outstanding thing for doctors to be doing. And I hope they start to do more of that, because we need as many people as we can to be supporting teachers right now. I really can't emphasize that enough. In this country right now, if our teachers are forced to go back to school, and now a lot of schools have decided to go completely remote for the time being, but if our teachers are forced to go back to school and children are forced to go back to school, especially since in the last 2 weeks of July, I believe there were about 100,000 new cases of coronavirus reported in children, just in children, in the United States. And it's not like these kids are completely immune to any kind of consequences from this virus. I mean, many of these kids have died as a result of this coronavirus, as a result of COVID-19. So putting the kids back in school right now in New York City, in such a densely populated place, 1.1 million kids, and as you're going to see later, 700,000 of those are going to be committed to going back to school, which is what the city wanted to initially do. I just don't think it's going to be a responsible thing to do, and I don't think that we're going to get away with it unscathed. I think we're going to have a lot of downstream consequences to this plan. And I think I mentioned before that even though a lot of schools are doing remote learning right now, which I think is great, that deadline expires for a lot of these schools maybe by mid to end September. So at that point, they have to then go back to their unions, and then they have to try and renegotiate. And so this should just be common sense at this point, that teachers and students should not go back to school until there are 14 consecutive days of no cases in New York City. 14 consecutive days of no cases in New York City. And until that happens, then I just don't think that this is a good idea. So I'm going to move on here. We have some signs. Just wanted to show a lot of the people. Make it safe for humans, not Wall Street, is one of my favorite signs over here on the right side. And then I highlighted 5 signs right here. So there's 114,000 homeless students, no laptops, no Wi-Fi. They need real schools. Class, I'm not sure what that says. Class strike education workers. Democrats, Republicans, enemies of public education. For teacher, student, parent, worker, control of schools. And then we have where infection rate low, schools should reopen safely with billions for sanitation and ventilation. Triple classrooms now, and hiring freeze, no hiring freeze, hire thousands. And this is from the Internationals group. Sorry, I know these are a little blurry. I wasn't able to get a better picture of these signs, unfortunately, so I had to blow up what I had on my phone. And so as you can see here, if there are low infection rates in that area, some teachers are even for reopening the schools. So I think that's actually something to think about, is they're willing to compromise even that much. I'm not willing to compromise. I don't want to see my wife be put in danger. I don't want to see her put her students in danger. I don't want her to be part of an ongoing problem in the world right now, which is this pandemic. We're still in the middle of this pandemic. It's not over by any means. And from every single angle, the establishment is trying to push people to get back to normal. And it's just like, how many more people have to die before we can have sensible reforms in this country? The government and the media have already confused people so much as to what's right and what's wrong. Even Dr. Anthony Fauci, who was making headlines for quite some time, told people not to go out and buy masks, which is absolutely absurd to me. Why? Why would you tell people that? Well, it was because they were worried about a mask shortage initially. So he lied to people. Dr. Anthony Fauci lied to the general public, a person who was supposed to be trusted in his position, and he was supposed to be antagonistic to Donald Trump. So people trusted him, particularly on the left, trusted him even further, because if you think that Trump is the problem in this country, then you're going to believe anybody who has an opinion that goes against Trump's narrative. So it's absolutely insane to me that everything that's going on, and that I even have to do this segment. It actually hurts me that I even have to do this segment. I had to kind of bring myself to do it. And then just to bring up the next two, make schools safe. At every school, teacher, student, parents, worker committees must approve reopening. Absolutely, 100%. And we're starting to see this. We're starting to see, and we're gonna move on to that in a second. And then we have make schools safe, class size 10. HEPA airfish. The class sizes here in New York City are absolutely ridiculous. I think it's the highest in the country, or at least among the highest in the country, and it's absolutely ridiculous. I think they have like over 30 students on average, and it's completely insane. That's a completely insane number of students to have in one classroom for one teacher. I mean, when I was a firefighter, you learn about span of control. And span of control means how many people can you effectively manage as a commander or leader of a fire crew. And that span of control is only 5 to 9 people, meaning I can only effectively manage between 5 and 9 people on a scene. Now, given that's a lot more complicated than this, so it's very much apples to oranges. I'm not trying to make an equivocation here, but you are trying to manage the learning of 30 plus students in a single session, in a single day, or whatever in elementary school it would be in a day. In a high school, for example, it would be in a session, right? Because you have different periods, etc. So whatever, I mean, managing that is just not feasible. The type of individual learning and the focus that you can have on each individual student, it really doesn't happen when you have class sizes that large. It becomes more of a college lecture, and then you're depending on kids who don't have the skills yet to do that kind of analytical reasoning, to go home and do that work on their own. They may need a little more hand-holding in the schools. That's why they're going to schools in the first place. And so between the fact that teachers deserve extra money, they definitely deserve to have better salaries in this country. And I would hope that they would be able to get diminished class sizes on top of that. And we're not talking about such significant money that the government wouldn't otherwise be willing to spend elsewhere, for example, on the military, or for example, on our police departments. And so it's really quite a toxic environment for teachers right now. And it's been this way for decades. It's not like this is anything new. I think this is just hitting an apex at this point in time. And that's why we're starting to see the walls to come down around this situation, is because without our teachers, I mean, I have so many teachers that I owe my respect to because of what they've provided to me, and teachers that I can't even imagine where I'd be today without my 8th grade science teacher or my 3rd grade teacher, Miss Monroe. I mean, these teachers, I can name so many of them that had such a great impact on me. But I was fortunate enough to be in an environment where 30 was kind of the max school size, and that was in Connecticut. So it's even worse here in New York. So to move on here, just another picture of the protests, and then I wanted to play this segment of my wife talking. I interviewed my wife because she's a teacher. She's a special education teacher at a charter school, and so she's going to make a statement here. Hey, so what are we doing here today?
So we're at a rally near City Hall. This is a rally for, it is mostly teachers groups connected with the teachers union, and then some other activist groups that are supporting teachers and students. I should emphasize that this is really on behalf of students and families above all, and teachers as well, that we are demanding that we are not required to go back into school until there are, I believe doctors are saying until there's 14 days of no infections, then we will consider going back. But right now, it's not that. What's frustrating is that de Blasio is saying that he has said he's talked to teachers, and that all the teachers he talks to say that they want to go back. And of course we want to go back, and of course our students want to go back. And I've also heard people say that for social emotional development that students should go back. And of course I work with young children. I'm a special educator for kids in kindergarten through 2nd grade. And of course, the best manner to educate children is to be in person with them, and for them to be in person with their friends. But that is not possible right now. And the anxiety of doing that would only produce more trauma. And in addition to that, we would be required to teach from 6 feet away. We're being told that we're going to wear masks, and our children need to wear masks while they're in school, which is insane. And in addition to that, we've already seen across the country, in Florida and in some other places, opening summer programs and opening schools already, where children have been getting infected and teachers are getting infected. So we're here today for a lot of different reasons, but really the main one is that we are not going to stand for being sacrifices and having our children be sacrificed, their health and well-being, in order for this like returning to normal and to force parents back into work, into this system.
Excellent. Thank you. So there you have it. I mean, she can talk at length, and I'll be putting her on the show at a later date to have her talk more about this. But the complexity to this is endless. I mean, there is so much to take into consideration, because you can't just think about a classroom of kids as 30 kids. You have to think about them individually. Each kid is an individual. They all deserve the appropriate amount of attention that is proven through studies, that is proven, or at least there is at least enough scientific evidence to provide a basis. But right now, that's not happening. I mean, teachers are barely even getting, what's it called? Educated, for lack of a better word, on how to do remote learning with their kids at this point in time. So it's becoming very difficult for me to continue to want to support what's going on right now. And I absolutely can't. It's just, there's no room for it in my brain for me to support it at all. And so my hope is that the city starts to listen. But as you're going to see in this next part that I'm going to report on, you're going to see that this is after the fact. This is 7 days later. 7 days later, AMNY reported that roughly 700,000 New York City students will return to some form of in-person classes this fall. Why? Why are they? This is absolutely outrageous to me. Why are they doing this? They're putting these kids in peril. They're putting these teachers in peril, and they're putting the citizenry in peril. Because as the cases decline here in New York City, which is a good thing, putting kids in school right now, I don't have a good analogy for it, but we are so close to the finish line here in New York, and now you're just going to break the legs of the runner right before they finish the race, and I just don't understand that. You're going to set us back. And so you can see here, just over 700,000 out of 1.1 million public school students will take classes in school buildings for at least part of the week this fall semester. Oh, I don't even have it on the screen. I'm very sorry. So this is what I'm talking about, AMNY. This is the article I was referring to. I forgot to switch. So just over 700,000 out of 1.1 million public school students will take classes in school buildings for at least part of the week this fall semester, Mayor Bill de Blasio said on Monday. Meanwhile, 264,000, or 26%, students will only attend remote classes. About 85% of the teaching workforce, or 66,000 instructors, will teach in a blended model, with 15% of teachers while 15% of teachers have requested reasonable accommodations to work from home, according to schools Chancellor Richard Carranza. The announcement comes 3 days after Governor Andrew Cuomo gave New York City schools the go-ahead to reopen this fall. And it's absolutely bananas. I mean, even despite the outcry from teachers and this protest, and again, it's not a huge protest. I understand it's not, everybody wasn't there, but there were a significant portion of people. But still, it's something to consider, and it's not like they're unreasonable. So what are they really fighting against? They're fighting against unreasonable people in power who want the systems to go back to normal so that kids can go to school, and that way they can get the economy going again. Because the economy, as we know here in the United States, is always more important than actual people here in the United States, according to the establishment. And we've seen that through and through. While the number of new cases rises in other parts of the country, the mayor continues to boast New York City's relatively low coronavirus cases. On August 8th, 53 people were admitted to a New York City public school hospital with possible COVID-19 symptoms. The city reported 285 people currently in public hospital intensive care units with COVID-19 complications, and 1% of people receiving coronavirus tests tested positive for the virus. De Blasio states, now look around the country, we see a challenging situation. The country reported over 5 million cases of the virus on Sunday, with health officials linking recent spikes in the virus to heavily populated states like California, Texas, Florida, and other southern states. Nearly 100,000 new cases of the virus reported in the last 2 weeks of July were in children, according to a report from the American Academy of Pediatrics and Children's Hospital Association. I hope and pray that their situation improves soon, but we are not those places. New York City is different. And again, it's different for now, but making moves like this right now, this close, is a horrible, horrible move. And I really cannot emphasize that enough. So I actually did want to play a couple of audio clips from the protest that we went to, and I just want to talk about, I just wanted to just play this clip for you, just one of the presenters who was also outstanding. I wish I got their names. I didn't. It's okay.
New York City has one of the most segregated public school systems in the country. We all know this. That's why you're here. There's over 100,000 homeless students in the city. 1 million people lost their jobs because of the crisis, and 2 million people face food insecurity. 2 million in a city of what, 8 million? That's 1 in 4 people. And 32,000, I think 35,000 people died. And it wasn't because of the virus, let's be real. It's because of poverty and because of lack of access to health care. That's why they died. And honestly, if de Blasio had closed schools 1 week earlier, just 1 week earlier in March, thousands upon thousands of people would have never been infected in the first place.
There you have it. I mean, de Blasio could have acted more quickly on this. Why didn't he? Why didn't he act more quick? I really just don't understand it. It's not like the signs weren't there. The United States had plenty of time to prepare for this virus. Plenty of time. They tracked the virus across the world, and then it got here. And despite everything they witnessed of what happened in China and what happened in other countries before it got here, I believe Italy was one of the places to get infected before it really took off here in the United States. I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't have shut things down much sooner, but they didn't. And then you have people like Andrew Cuomo. And my whole theory right now is that de Blasio and Cuomo were just basically playing a game of good cop, bad cop, because they were getting a lot of press coverage. And so de Blasio was taking the position of defending the police, for example, after the George Floyd protests began. And then Cuomo was taking the position of not taking the side of the police officers. So it's really just absurd to me, the political mind games that these two politicians have been playing. These two very powerful people here in New York. And so just one more thing about Governor Cuomo that I learned as another clip from the protest.
I can tell you what the governor is doing. Just yesterday and today, he's been rubbing elbows with the rich, asking them to come back to New York City, telling them that he won't tax them.
I mean, you know, there's an article out about this particular thing that I will gladly bring up, but I don't think it's worth it right now. But basically, Cuomo it's like they haven't learned their lesson, right? They're not really defending us. They're defending the wealthiest people who we need to be taxing more right now so that services can be funded here in New York City so that we don't have a quarter of people who are food insecure in New York City right now. I mean, just go outside. I'm in Harlem. Outside, you can just walk down the street and there's food banks. There's people lined up down the street at food banks right now. It's absolutely ridiculous what's going on in this country. And this isn't just here in New York. This is across the country. We're in a failed state right now. This country is a failed state, and the Democratic establishment and the Republican establishment are not offering people anything. Nothing but platitudes, nothing but, oh, they're worse and they're worse. Oh, the DNC is worse, the RNC is worse. So vote for vote for us. No, I'm not voting for either of you. I'm done. I've seen what you've both done to this country. Endless war, no health care, inadequate health care for people, public education system in tatters. You've destroyed unions. You gutted welfare. The decay of our civil liberties in this country. We live in an oligarchy. You can't even vote against that oligarchy in this country because both political parties have been captured by that oligarchy. And that's why I just think voting in itself it's an ineffectual method. It's not actually going to get any results at this point. You people need to get out in the streets right now. I'm begging you to get out in the streets right now. Protest, organize. Don't just protest, by the way. Organize. Make sure you have a message. Make sure you have something put together. Put some time into it. I know getting out in the streets is the hard part at the end of the day, but the organizing is the easy part. You can sit at home and do it. You don't have to make it. You don't have to make it such a complicated thing. You just need to be able to get people together and on the same page. And so I really think that's where this country needs to go right now, because unless what's happening right now impacts the bottom line of the perpetrators in our society, then we're never going to get anywhere. So I'm going to move on here in the presentation. So the Washington Post reports 9 days after this AMNY report that the roughly 700,000 New York City students will return to some form of in-person classes. The Washington Post reports the New York City teachers threatened to strike over school reopenings. Good. I'm glad that this is gaining more momentum, and we're seeing it now that it's gaining more momentum. The union representing New York City's public school teachers said its members would not return to classrooms next month unless the city met their health and safety demands, including testing all students and staff for that coronavirus. And ensuring all schools have a nurse. The announcement from the United Federation of Teachers, UFT, which represents 75,000 professionals, comes a week after Mayor Bill de Blasio announced that schools would reopen September 10th for in-person classes, saying he believed the city's low positivity rate would allow for students to return safely. The city, once the nation's epicenter of the pandemic, has a positive test rate of less than 0.25%, the mayor said Wednesday. UFT President Michael Mulgrew threatened legal action against the city and said teachers would strike if the mayor tried to force them to return to classrooms. And he acknowledged that it would be virtually impossible for the city to meet the union's health and safety demands before September 10th, making a showdown between teachers and the mayor increasingly likely. Good. I'm totally with it. And 2 days later, a New York City 11th grade teacher, Amanda Geduld, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, or it might be Geduld, I apologize, teaches 11th grade English in the New York public schools. And she writes this opinion article for Washington Post. She says, I'm a New York public school teacher. A safe return to school simply isn't possible right now. On Wednesday afternoon, New York City's education department hosted a virtual town hall for teachers and administrations to discuss plans for the fall. Schools Chancellor Richard Carranza opened the meeting with a moment of silence to honor the 79 teachers and staff lost to the coronavirus pandemic. What went unmentioned, many of these deaths might have been prevented if the city and state had worked swiftly in the spring to shut down schools and protect students and faculty. So it's the same thing. It's the same thing on August 3rd, what that person was saying in the audio clip that I shared with you earlier. Same thing. If they just worked a little sooner. Now, hindsight's a very easy thing, but again, it's not like it was really hindsight. We saw this coming. The country saw this coming. They could have shut things down very quickly and simply. And that would have been that. There would have been no disaster to have to avoid. Excuse me, we would have, that the wording is a little weird there. I'll say we would have completely avoided, almost completely avoided a disaster. It appears that government officials have not learned their lesson. The city plans to reopen public schools for its 1.1 million students on September 10th. After the town hall's ominous start, it continued in a similar vein. The school's chancellor discussed budget cuts, layoffs, and his desperate hope to receive last-minute state or federal funding. That didn't inspire confidence that Carranza or his staff had adequately prepared for our return to school buildings in 3 weeks. So, I mean, it's just absolutely crazy to me. I got to end this here. This has already been about 35 minutes, but it's just absolutely crazy what's going on here in New York City. Support your teachers. Go out, join a protest, be safe, wear a mask, bring hand sanitizer, don't get too close to people, make sure you practice social distancing, etc. And honestly, just I wish you all the best of luck out there, because right now things are just, they're still pushing us. They're still pushing us. Even after everything this country has been through over the last 8 months this year, or rather 6 months or 7 months, I should say, or 5 maybe. Even after all of this and the psychological trauma and all the deaths and all of the people who have gotten sick and all of the long-term complications and the people who have gotten sick and everything, that all of the jobs that have been lost, and now there's an eviction crisis on the border, or around the corner at this point. Even after all of that, they're still pushing us. They're still pushing us back into the slots that we were in before this whole thing started. You know why? Because they don't actually want to learn a lesson. The establishment isn't going to learn a lesson until we force them to learn that lesson. And that's really the whole point of this right now, is that we need to get out there today and we need to force them to learn that lesson. Otherwise, nothing is going to fundamentally change in this country, just like Joe Biden said. So make sure you get out there.